Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of World at War Comics. My next special guest is Mr. David Taylor. He is a musician, a writer, a creator. Man, you kind of do it all, David, man. Just going through your website, man. You got stuff for kids, you got coloring books, you got fantasy, you got sci-fi. Man, you've been doing this for a little bit. Man, it's so good to talk to you, David. How you doing today? Let's start there.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm whirlwindy. A lot of things happening at once, but that's the name of the game.
That's the name of the game, man. The life of a creative, right?
That's right. 24/7. Better get used to it.
Yeah, we are kind of chatting a little bit before we hit the record button, man. You were talking about kind of that inspiration, and when it comes, man, you got to be prepared for it, because nothing's a worse feeling than having an idea and not reacting to it. And then, like you said, a few months down the road, you see it somewhere else. You're like, man, I had that idea, you know?
That's right. That's right. Well, the muse is the creative energy that floats around the earth, and it's always trying to give us things to give birth to, things that are supposed to exist out here instead of just the invisible world. But you can't control her, you can't predict her, you can't schedule her. She just hit when she hit, and she's uh, always going to go with people that are ready to go. And so you have to learn. So I trained myself first to do it as a songwriter, because many times I've discovered if I'm playing, if I'm composing, if I hit a frustration point, I have to walk away. When I walk away, then the idea hits me later. It never fails. And then when it hits, then I have to immediately write it down or record it so I don't forget it. Like one of my more popular songs with my band that I did years ago. I had written it early 90s and I kept playing it, kept playing it, kept playing. I said, something's missing. Then one day the idea came to me, change the key. So I dropped it a half step and it was our most popular tune. But I had to learn how to play it in that key too. So it's like, jump on that, jump on it, jump on it. So yeah.
So what is the secret that you have found over the years to be more sensitive to the muse as it comes?
The secret I found, really funny you should ask that because I teach my students that. The secret I found is self acceptance. What a lot of creative people don't know is that we have antenna. We are designed to have spiritual antenna, to be more sensitive to that. So when that creative energy is floating around, we can tap into it. And life is always talking to you. See, your medium is the vehicle you use to create, but life itself is always talking to you in a sunrise, in an animal sound, in an experience that you've had. You have an internal sense of what's happening in your body. You have an external sense of the world. So when you tumble down the hill, it looks like everything's spinning. Life is always when you talk to people, like I was talking to a songwriter partner one time, and we were talking about how you think your life's going to turn out versus how it actually turns out. And they were talking about their expectations. Then she looked at me and said, "That was the wrong dream, baby." And I said, "That's a song." And so we wrote a song
Oh, that's
called
awesome.
"Wrong Dream." I said, "That is a blues tune." So we wrote it. So I'm saying, it's always, and we have more sensitivity to that, but you have to accept that that's how you are, because that's going to come off as funny to other people sometimes,
Yeah.
because sometimes you, uh, we spend most of our time in our head. So you kind of have to spin out of that energy sometimes. And sometimes when you're really focused on something, you can get really into it. And so you have to accept that that's how you are and who you are.
Wow. Well, let's kind of go back, David. When did that creative side, when did you notice that creative side and that passion for storytelling, whether it's through music, comic books, whatever that medium happens to be, but where did that passion begin in your life? Was it at an early age? Was there someone in your life that kind of inspired you to kind of open up that side of you, that creative side? Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yes, that started in my life around 4 or 5, very early. The person that sparked the whole thing was my father. My dad was and is my hero, and my father's gone on. He's been away many years, and I still love him, and he's still my hero. My father taught me how to read. I started reading early. I started reading three things. I started reading newspapers, the Bible, and comic books. And so my father would take me to the newsstand, and man, fresh printed newspapers and books have a smell. They have that fresh print smell, and man, it's intoxicating if you love it. So I would so look forward to the days we would go to the newsstand and he would buy me comic books. And my first comic book was a Fantastic Four comic book. And I was just hooked. I was just hooked. And then when my father kind of saw what I could do, he said to me, I'm expecting this level from you from now on. I was like, okay, Dad, no pressure or anything. But when he saw how I could read and then he saw I could write, he challenged me to be excellent, to continue to achieve as highly as I could. When your dad says something to you, it makes your eyes get really big, and everything your father says feels like Moses getting the Ten Commandments. So when Dad said that to me, it really struck me. It really challenged me, and so I've loved reading since then. I've loved creating since then, and I've also discovered that challenging yourself in different mediums. Uh, Poetry is not song lyrics. Poetry is a completely different thing. When you're doing song lyrics, those words have to be singable. You have to know something about singing. You still have to study rhyme scheme and meter and all different kind of stuff, but it's not the same. You can say things in a poem that you can't say quite the same way in a lyric. And then prose is something else. So I'm saying that challenging yourself to create in different mediums also helps increase your sensitivity to the muse, because the more kind of tools you give the muse to work with,
Mm.
the more ways she can speak to you.
What was the first thing that you kind of worked on after getting that inspiration?
I worked on a song, and I still remember the song. It's called When You Hear the Voice of the Lord, Harden Not Your Heart. So I started working on that, and then after reading comic books and loving that world so much, then I started creating my own heroes, and I started writing and drawing my own books, and they're very crude, but it was so much fun, and I did it for hours.
Hmm.
If I like, so I would go to school and I would come home and I would just draw till I went to bed. And so I loved coming up with the adventures. I loved coming up with the costumes. I loved all the tropey things that people get mad about now. I actually quite fell in love with
Yeah,
when I
exactly.
was a child. So I love the dual identity. I love changing when you transform into your super self. I love that process. That's incredible. Um, and I loved the whole thing about having an arch nemesis.
Hmm.
I love that. So I started drawing my own comics around 5 or 6, and I was hooked. And then when I got into music more full time, I was more of a teenager. So then I had to start that lifelong juggle of balance.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
What was your first published work, whether self-published or
Oh man,
you remember the first thing that you published?
oh man. I have to go back and look at that one. I think uh, some a homemade comic
Hmm.
when I was in 6th grade, because my English teacher, took a strong interest in it, and then for sure some poetry when I was in junior high school, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But I have to go way back in the archives to think about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, when I look at your kind of portfolio of work, we kind of mentioned it right when we started recording. It's quite diverse, right? You have from coloring books to children's books to fantasy to sci-fi. Is there a favorite genre that you like to work within?
Um, if I had to pick one, it would be superheroes.
Yeah.
But in terms of when the inspiration hits, it just kind of is what it is, and so I tend to go with it because I love the creative process. If I had to pick one, though, it'd be superheroes. That's the one I've loved the most and the longest. So yeah.
Now, as far as writing goes, what are the major differences between, writing or the process, I would say? What are the major differences in the process that you take when it comes to writing something from young adults or children to a superhero to fantasy? Do you approach any of those differently, or are the principles the same as you start to write within those different areas?
Uh, that's a good question. The answer is it depends on it depends on how I flesh out the idea. Because for me, once I begin to flesh out the idea, then I get a sense of the medium. That's really important to me, and that's something that I very much tap into. So, and you see it on my Twitter timeline all the time. What does this work best as? So when you're dealing with an idea, you're dealing with it conceptually, but then as you flesh it out, you get a sense of the kind of story you want to tell. So then for me, the very next thing is, in what medium are we going to tell this story? That's super, super important to me, because I think that's where so many pieces of content, because when you get it right, it's all good. It just kind of sings. But when you do something, I give you one of my favorite examples is the Dark Phoenix saga. I forgot if it was, I think it was because I met Claremont at a convention one time, and he was like, it took us, 18 months to tell that story, 2 years to tell it in comics. And so the reason they keep struggling with the Dark Phoenix saga is because they don't understand that for the Dark Phoenix saga to work, you must fall in love with Jean Grey and you must know who she was. That's the whole key because it's those stark transformations that give the emotional punch to the story. Jean becoming something so far away from who she was as a person. And she is the most unassuming telepath on earth because all the men around her were in love with her. Professor X loved her, Bobby loved her, Warren loved her, Hank loved her, Scott loved her, and she's just like la la la. So she's unassuming and she's a telepath. That's just such a great contrast. And so when you're so unassuming and so not full of yourself, till you can read minds, but you can't tell all these men love me. So then you go from that to being seduced to being a colonial version of a black queen and a dominatrix and all that. It's like, what? That's the power of the Dark Phoenix saga, is taking Jean on this character journey that's so far from who we knew her to be. And then taking her to, a cosmic level where she has the power to create and destroy on a level beyond, normal superhuman powers, if you were. And just what would that do to you mentally? So you have to understand that to understand that Dark Phoenix is not going to work in a 2-hour movie. Just won't. So if you want to take it out of the comics, it needs to be animation. First X-Men series did it, or it needs to be a TV series like a Shogun style, where you have seasons and episodes and all that, and you develop that. Because if you don't take Gene on the journey, it's not going to have any impact. So that's a long way to go to say that's the same way I think when I'm creating something. I look at the idea, then I say, how do I want to tell this? And then that's what helps me determine the medium. Like, okay, this is a novella. Okay, this is a full-length novel. Okay, this needs to be a comic series. Okay, this is a series, but it's a short series. Okay, that kind of thing. So it goes from conception to fleshing out the idea to what's the best medium, and then I'll write for the medium.
Interesting. Do you think that, I don't want to say failure, but that's the only word I could think of right now. Do you think that's a failure of a lot of creatives where they focus on the medium and then try to tell the story through that medium, as opposed to allowing that story to come to them and then trying to figure out where that best fits as far as the medium goes?
Sometimes it's not them. Sometimes if you're hired to do something, you
Mm.
have to work within the parameters that your employer gives you. But a lot of it, it's like I said, it goes back to the self-acceptance thing. You have to accept that that's how creativity works. And a lot of people just don't. They think creativity can work on a clock or work on a, we want this to happen, so we're just going to make it happen. Creativity itself does not work like that. So sometimes it's not the creative person. Sometimes they're just trying to function in the parameters they've been hired for. But if you have control over that, then yeah, it's something you need to develop, as far as I'm concerned, to know, is this a graphic novel? Like, is this a story I'm going to tell one time, but I'm going to tell it in, 90 pages, 60 pages, 120 pages, and that's it? Is this something that has ongoing things? Because then you got to pace for every issue. When TV shows do that, man, they are gold. When you have setup and payoff in every episode, you don't have to have the big season payoff until the end. But when you have, and see, it all ties together, that in songwriting is a tension and release. Everything about a good melody takes you somewhere. It's tension and release. A good chord progression is tension and release. So it works the same way. So you have to have the right medium to make that happen. So the question is it turning a page? So I have to set up my tension on this page because that's what makes you want to turn and see what happens. See? And so that's why understanding the medium is so important. And so if you can control it at all, it's definitely something you need to learn. Like what is the way to tell the story that I want to tell?
Is there a genre where you find that it's easier to do exactly what you're just saying? Whether it's, fantasy or like, do you have one where like this is this genre is the easiest for me to be able to do exactly what you said, would create that tension between each page, or is it kind of even across all different genres or styles of writing?
Okay, that answer is two parts.
Mm,
The first answer is when you have a genre and a fan base that accepts certain conventions, then, and one of my favorite examples of that is like romance. If you're going to write in the romance genre, there's certain things that have to be there or else the fans won't accept it. But everybody's cool with that. Fantasy and sci-fi is not like that. And so the difference between fantasy and sci-fi is that sci-fi has to have some kind of rooting in something that's real world, even if it goes into the fantastical. It's got to have some type of anchor, even if it's just Newtonian physics. And sci-fi fans will eat you alive if you put water and electricity in the same space and don't nothing bad happen. Like you can't do that with sci-fi. With fantasy, that's easier for me to write in because I can make the rules. So like in my novels, I have red grass and blue grass and yellow grass all in the same thing. I have angels. People just imagine angels with two wings. My angels have multiple wings. So with fantasy is easier for me because I don't have the constraints of the speed of sound. Because if you make a speedster run, all the superhero people will be like, "How fast are they?" And you can't do that at this speed. It doesn't work that way. And okay, so 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 fantasy where you just make up the world. I prefer. Like I have one of my books that I have out. It's called Creole Codito,
mm.
and that's a combination Greek Japanese. It means cold sword. It's set on a fire planet, but all the heroes have ice powers. So I love stuff like that. I love that. You can't tell me right and wrong with that. I can just do what I want. So that's better for me.
Yeah, yeah. You're allowed to cook when it comes to that area,
Yes. Yes.
huh?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's kind of walk through some of the things that you've done up to this point, David. And starting, just looking at your website and the list of all the different titles and whatnot. Let's start with children's books because you've written extensively within that area. Can you kind
Mhm.
of talk about some of the titles that you have written for children?
Okay. My motivation for writing children's books is to pass on my love of reading
Mm,
because my father passed that on to me.
yeah,
And so it's one of those things where like once it gets in you, it's a good habit to hook. You know what I mean? Because we can get hooked in life with so many bad things. But once you learn how to love to read, that never leaves you. And it's so beneficial. And so that's my motivation there. But also there's a way you see the world when you're a kid that only happens one time.
yeah,
And it's like everything else in life, it's a yin and a yang. So the pro side is the expectation, the excitement, the wonder. You only have that the first decade of your life. And it's nothing like it. But the yang, the balance is that you don't know danger when you're a child. So you got wonder and danger living in the same space. And so many times when I write with that sense of wonder. It's so much fun to revisit it. Like, what does this look like to young eyes? It's like, wow, And so my very first children's book was Dear God, Why Doesn't Broccoli Taste Like Chocolate?
yeah. I saw that one.
Because I was like, whenever you talk to someone and just about every nutrition, everything I've ever studied has said vegetables is a good thing. Except if you have vitamin K allergies, then you can't eat green leafies.
Mhm.
But other than that, vegetables are people always like people don't eat enough vegetables. So one day I said to myself, well, if they tasted better, we'd eat more. They're not like fruit, and all that. And I said, no, I'm gonna have to ask God about that. Just why don't the green leafies taste like chocolate? Everybody'd be healthy then. It wouldn't that have been simpler? And I said, that's a question a kid would ask. So I wrote a book on that very thing. And my hero, Zach, has heterochromia, and everybody doesn't always notice that his eyes are two different colors. And he's the type, and he's at the age where he just talks to God like I'm talking to you, because you wouldn't think differently when you're that age. So you just say, man, it sure would be great. All these adults are telling me. And also, like myself, one of the things that happens when you're a kid is that you see things that you can't say because adults get mad at you. And so Zach is like, all these people telling me to eat my vegetables, but they don't eat them. And I don't, and that's when you get your first sense of dichotomy or double standard or just straight up hypocrisy is when you're a child.
Yeah.
And so I wrote Zach with all that in him. Like, this would be easier, but I see him saying one thing, but then they do the other thing, and I feel all this pressure and all that. All that's a kid story.
Yeah.
And then the follow up I wrote, and I still have to finish the trilogy. But the follow up I wrote was, "Dear God, why didn't you make everybody the same color?"
Mm.
Because we're always dealing with people call it racism. I do not agree with that word because there's only one race. It's the human race.
Yeah.
We're all the seed of our father, grown in the womb of our mother. We all breathe oxygen. If you cut us, we bleed red. Gravity fastens us to the ground. So Star Trek has races. Klingon, Breen, Romulan, Andorian, those are races.
Hmm.
We're humans, you
Yeah.
know.
I love
But
that.
so from a child's point of view, because you don't know that when you're a kid. When you're a kid, you just know these are my classmates. I like this one. I don't like that one. I'm buds with this one. Want to avoid this one. I have good playtime with this one. This one's kind of mean. That's all you know when you're a kid. And so that's another kid's question, like, what would the world look like if we didn't have the cultural or ethnic differentiation and we had a more homogenous experience? Would that change anything? So on the adult level, I said no, it wouldn't, because there would be, if everybody was blue, there would be light skinned blues and dark skinned blues, and people would still
You'll have
people
same.
would still trip on that. But I said, from a kid's point of view, so Zach imagined that world and said, God, the show would have been easier, and so once again, it's tapping into that wonder.
Yeah.
And then my alphabet series, I have a series of books called My Alphabet Is, and it's 26 ways to teach ABCs. What inspired that series was some of the stuff I saw was just kind of boring and repetitive. So I said I need to come up with some new ways to teach ABCs. So I came up with 6 or 7 different ways. I use candy, treats, my alphabet is yummy. I use pets, my alphabet is my pet. My favorite one, of course, is my alphabet is super. I use superpowers, eyes for invisibility, S is for speed, stuff like that. So I get to combine all the favorite stuff. So, and then another one that people love is I made one called My Alphabet is Musical. So I actually use musical terms, and I know they're kind of advanced, but I'm like, there's nothing wrong with challenging a child. So F is for forte, A is for accidental, that kind of thing. So, it's a fun way to remember your ABCs. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to connect that fun experience with learning your ABCs to make it more something that you'd want to do, because as a music teacher, because I've been a music teacher in my life, I've taught everybody from little kids to seniors. I mean, like 80s, without exception, without exception. All of my adult students at some point in their life had a bad teacher. And when you're young and you have that experience, it puts you off music. And then when you get older, you regret it. You didn't realize maybe I just needed to change teachers. I didn't need to stop practicing. So you really want to pick your clarinet back up. You really want to pick the piano back up. It does not fail. And so I said, we need to be having fun while we're learning. Fun, learning don't need to be drudgery because I can put people off of it. So I said, I want to have fun stuff to just when you start reading, just when you learn your ABCs, you're having fun looking at the pictures, wrestling with the concepts, talking to the adults, what does this mean? That kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's awesome, man. And let's talk a little bit about superheroes, David. When, from a comic book standpoint, what was the first comic book that you published?
That I published.
Yeah.
First ones that I published were self-created stuff. I made a hero called Bat Boy
Hmm.
around junior high school. And then I have a lot of heroes that I'm actually doing now. Uh, Published recently on this day and age was the Nephilim Wars.
Yeah, the
The,
Nephilim Wars, yeah.
the Nephilim Wars are part of my overall Soldier, Serpents, and Sin series because I actually have different content in that. I have novels, novellas, comic books, game. So that's more of multimedia. But that's set in the 30th century, and that's about the Nephilim uh, coming back again because the earth is divided in that context. It's
Mhm.
half human, half angel. And so there are a lot of good parallels and metaphors in that. Who has rights to the earth? Who's the legitimate, kind of race and that kind of thing, and can we get along in spite of our differences? And so I got more stuff coming out there too, um, because the way they're born is different from the way regular humans are born, and then uh, when you're born and you have enhanced abilities or when you have different features, what does that do to you psychologically? And so it's about that on so many different levels and about who the earth belongs to. And So, uh, just getting that in your hand is just such a thrill. This is nothing like your first professional looking comic book, and nothing like, talking to people about it and people liking it and buying it, getting feedback, and and also learning from your mistakes or things you didn't see or things you hadn't considered, because I very much understand that you cannot be objective about your own work. So every baby that you birth, you love it. You think it's the greatest thing ever. But then you'll hear some other stuff, and you'd be like, oh man, I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought of things from that angle. And so it helps with the growth when you make your subsequent books. So yeah, so junior high school for my original kind of unprofessional one with my little bat boy, and the Nephilim Wars professionally.
Yeah, yeah. And you said yet you're working on some other work around the Nephilim Wars. Is that something
Yeah.
that'll be out this year, or where do
Um,
fans find more when it comes to that storyline?
I have a sequel to the Lucifer book out now called Too Many Wings.
Mm.
And it's a novella about what happens in the aftermath of that first battle. Because anything I say will be a spoiler, but
Yeah, yeah. Let's not do that. Let's not do
uh,
that.
let's just say all of the angels, because this isn't really a spoiler, all of the angels don't feel the same way
Mm.
about the war and about where they should live. They don't all see it the same way, which to me was part and parcel of, because I wondered, how could Lucifer talk angels into joining his rebellion?
Hmm.
Because somehow he was able to talk, according to biblical information, a third of the angels. That just blows my mind. And so in my series, he's an extremely eloquent speaker, a skilled manipulator, but also he spoke to some angelic classes that were disgruntled. And so kind of used that as a wedge. And so the novella, The Aftermath, deals with some more of that idea, Too Many Wings. And then I have another book that I've been waiting for a while to get out, just having the time to get it together. It's called Flight of the Alimbi.
Hmm.
The Alimbi are the mothers of the Nephilim.
Hmm.
So what happens if you're a mom but you're pregnant with a half angel baby? And so it's got to deal with that. So that's why I need to get somewhere and get these books done and get them out. And to do that, you just simply need financial support. You need patrons of some kind, because that's another thing that comes along with this life until you can get to the point where it fully sustains you like you want it to. And then sometimes, even when it does, you need patronage. The arts always need patrons,
Yeah.
because you have to have that uninterrupted time to craft out the thing you're trying to craft out. So there's more coming with that. Book three, because one and two are out. Book three, I'm trying to get finished, so I can get that out too. And then more stuff I want to do, like an audiobook. So as much of that as I can get out this year, I want to get that out. So I always, go through my social media channels to let people know.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Can you talk about some of the other genres of writing that you have done and some of those titles as well?
So with Lucifer, Soldier, Serpents and Sin, that's a novel. It's
Hmm.
kind of the novel that sparked it all. I have a role-playing game called Soldiers and Serpents. And what happens is it's set also in the aftermath of the novel, but basically you get to play as angels making choices. And the way the role-playing game is set up is you can use light side powers or dark side powers. So you have tasks, but you get to choose how you want to do them. And each choice you make affects your character. So it's like by the time the end of the game, you're a result of the choices you made, which I thought was the whole idea.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was a lot of fun to put together. And so there's that whole thing that started from an idea of I wondered what happened the first time the devil saw himself in a reflective surface.
Hmm.
So, back when the earth was young, it wouldn't have been a mirror, it would have been a body of water, most likely. So I said, what happened when Lucifer leaned over into a pond and saw what he'd become? The name Lucifer means light bearer. So you go from a light bearing angel in the heavenlies, and now you're on earth, and you look and you see you're this twisted, gnarly, ugly dragon thing. And I said to myself, what would happen if at one point you were the coolest of the cool kids? Because you would have to have the kind of influence to talk a third of the angels into following you. You would have to have clout and influence. So, what would happen if you were the coolest of the cool kids? All of heaven rejoiced when you showed up to make your music. One day you let that get to your head and make you think you could overthrow the creator, that somehow you were the ultimate star of the show instead of just a star on the creator stage. And that whole progression. And so that's where that came from. Um, my poetry is always because I love words. I love words, and so I love stringing them together. I love to find new creative ways to say what I'm trying to say. But also, I like poetry because it's the only medium I found that seems to be able to use realism and metaphor and hyperbole and allegory all in the same space. You can do that in a poem like you can do it nowhere else. So you can use descriptive words, you can use tangible words, you can use completely made up words, made up things, but it's the feeling you're trying to describe. And that's why I like writing poetry because there aren't really any limits. It's also one of the few. There are styles, there's haiku, there's full length, there's styles, but there aren't limits. So however creatively you want to say something, you can say it in a poem. And it helped me understand why so many writers wrote poetry because I love it. I love it. And I love Langston Hughes. I love so many different other poets whose works I've studied because they have such mastery. Maya Angelou, they have such mastery of words, and they can take a few words and put you right in a scene. They can make you feel the splinters on a wood park bench in just a sentence. That is word mastery, and I love it. So that's why I write in that. And people have told me I have a good voiceover voice, so I started recording
You
some of
definitely
my
do.
poems. So I started recording some of my poems, and that's also something else I love to do is voiceover work. So
Yeah.
I'm working on doing more of that. And so each one of the things I write in, there's a hook in it for me. There's a particular thing about it that I love, and then also again, if it's the proper frame for what I'm trying to say. And like I said, poetry is just unlimited. It's just unlimited. It's just, you can study words for the rest of your life and always write a poem. That's lifelong. And, some things you write, for example, some music is timeless, but some music is very much rooted in a stage of life, like TV shows.
Hmm.
Like if you're going to write for a young adult audience, that's all about what's happening to you at that stage of life. But it's not the only stage of life. And so you would look kind of funny talking about love, later on the way you talk about it when it first hit. It's not, your perspective on it is different.
Right.
So when I'm going to different genres and different mediums, it's because there's something in there that I love and can use to say what I'm trying to say in a very, very unique and expressive way.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Now, when it comes to some of the other genres like fantasy, can you walk through some of the other titles that you have as well outside of some of the ones that we've mentioned already?
Some of my other fantasy titles where I have, well, my uh, second book that actually went to number 2 on Amazon, but Amazon got rid of the program. It
Uh,
was a program where you could write in a established sci-fi universe. The author of the book. So anyway, they made a Wayward Pine series. So I wrote a book in the Wayward Pine series, and it went to number 2.
that's incredible.
People really, really liked it, and so I loved working in that because I love the whole idea of the mystery of what's going on with the town and what the antagonists are and what they can and cannot do. And I have another sci-fi series that I had to re-edit because I got so much of the pushback I talked about earlier.
Mhm.
But it's basically futuristic series where mankind is underground, but there's danger above ground. So it's a little bit like Logan's Run. They use psychological manipulation to kind of keep people in their place, but there's some people that brave the outside world, but there's dangers there. So I got that going on, and it's military as well. Excuse me. I love doing military stuff because I love the idea. See, I believe it takes all kinds to make a world. What people do is people say if something doesn't fit into my frame, then it's wrong. And I just don't agree with that. It's not wrong because it doesn't fit in your frame, because it exists. If if it couldn't exist or wasn't supposed to exist, but it's right there in front of you. So just because you don't like it doesn't mean anything. And so when I hear people's different ideas about war, it fascinates me because I'm like, the only reason you can sleep at night is because somebody else stays up all night. The only reason you can sleep at night is because someone is willing to risk their life to make you be safe in your space. And that's evident in every country on earth. And so the juxtaposition of the ideas it takes for military and law enforcement and society and all that always fascinates me. Always. That's why on Twitter I'm always talking about Batman and the Joker. I'm always talking about, how much more is the Joker going to be allowed to get away with? And well, Batman doesn't kill now, yeah, but somebody does. Jason Todd does. Somebody has something to say about all this killing. So, so I've got that sci-fi book coming out. Hopefully, I can get to that this year about my my underground colony society, and then I have the coloring books still in the same series, but I have coloring books where I have, it's called Animals of the Realm or Secret Beasts of the Realm. And the idea there is that there are animals in the heavenly realm that were created that were never released on Earth, which makes total sense to me. So just because we have animals that we know, it completely makes sense to me that there would be animals that we don't know. And plus, also, I think there's some truth in the mythical animals, like the phoenix, and stuff like that that people say is myth. But I'm like, is it really? Or does it just exist on a plane that we're not normally on? Because that's two different things. So I have those books out. Like I said, I'm working on the sequel to Creole Cottertail because I have there's a whole story going on there with Creole Cottertail, the comic book. It centers around a blind android. And the first question you want to ask is that if you're synthetic, why are you blind?
Yeah.
And that's at the whole heart of the story. So I've got that going on. Like I said, the flight of the Limbi, where we're talking about pregnant moms, pregnant with half angel babies. So all this is stuff that I have got to get out. Some of it's out, some of it's I've got to finish. Um, uh, and then another fantasy story I've been working on. You don't want to say too much, but it has to do with, I'll put it this way, has to do with, and this will probably be a musical actually, has to do with the whole male female dynamic, because that's another situation that fascinates me because I have grown as a person enough to understand that you are never going to understand the other perspective. And that's why people waste their lives. You waste your lives trying to make somebody see it the way you see it. And when it comes to the gender thing, you ain't never going to happen. You are never going to make your spouse because their life experience is different than yours. And but instead of accepting that, it's just like we go round and round and round and round about it. And so I have something I'm developing around that idea, and just dealing with that whole thing, and maybe going back to high school, where everything starts and all that. Because I've had to tell many people, I've had to tell many men. I said, okay, one of the things you got to understand about your girl, your fiance, if you're going to propose to her, she's been dreaming about that moment since she's a very little girl. So if she's 22 when you propose, she has 20 years of mental and emotional energy. She's imagined that moment from every angle. Top down shots, side shots, face to face shots, what you're wearing. And she's going to remember every detail because women tend to have detailed brains. So she's going to remember the tone of your voice, the cologne you were wearing, the clothes you had on, how you said what you said, every little, and she's been thinking about it. So I was a part of a seminar one time when I said that, and one of the women on the panel just fell over, started laughing. She said, "David, thank you for letting me know that I'm not crazy." I said, You're not crazy. She's been thinking about that moment where a guy that loves me gets on one knee and asks me to be his wife. So if she's 22, that's 2 decades, mental and emotional energy. I said, for us men, if we put 20 weeks putting up on maybe half a year, that's a huge effort for a man because we just work very, very differently. So if I've been thinking about, the ring, and if I've been planning all that, and I've done it for pushing up on half a year's time, from our point of view, I don't know how else to show you that I love you than that kind of dedication. But it's not the same thing. And it's never going to be the same thing. And so I'm fascinated by that. And so I want to express that too, but that will probably end up being a musical because, like I said, one of the things that fascinates me the most is why we argue. Mm. Because you're trying to make him see it the way you see it as, oh my God.
Ain't gonna happen.
Out of all the things in life that could happen, that is one that is never going to happen.
Yeah.
It just won't. Uh, the experience of living in a body full of testosterone is unique. We know what that's like. And so much of what we do is motivated by our bodies, not our souls. We understand that. But for females, it's not that that doesn't happen for their experience. But what I've discovered is there's always a healthy dose of emotion in it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even when there's a physical component, they seem to be very much also interested in the emotions involved. Even if it is physical, there seems to be that other component for them where that emotional piece is center. See, both of those, neither one of those experiences is wrong. They're just different. But you are never going to make someone that's not your gender understand. You're never, it's not going to happen. So, yeah, so I'm writing a piece on that. But the way it feels, the way it's developing, songs coming to me about that. You got to sing that. So that will probably be a musical. Yeah.
Now, since you had this career that started on the musical side, and then you have this passion for storytelling. Is there a balance that you need to have between those two ways of kind of telling stories? Or have you found maybe you do less of one and more of the other, and that's just maybe a natural progression in your experience of being a storyteller?
Uh, just speaking for myself only,
Yeah, yeah, just you, your experience.
yeah, there is no balance.
Okay.
There's no balance. You need to be able to live 1,000 years. Can you imagine being Prince? Can you imagine having so much music in you? Because Prince was notorious for not sleeping. He's notorious for staying in the studio 2 and 3 days at the time and then sleeping. So can you imagine being so pregnant with your medium? So there's no balance. Most creative people, in our best case scenario, we work by the project
Mm,
and not by a clock, or we work by a season. So for me personally, it's what do I need to focus on in this season? That hasn't always lent itself to consistency or helping me be as scheduled as I need to be. And so that's been a challenge, but there's no balance. You gotta give yourself to something when you're in it.
hmm
And so the closest thing I come to balance is a set amount of time to practice piano every day. Uh, you know, and but it really depends on because especially if you're self-publishing, so
hmm
many steps, so much detail, and even if you're not self-publishing and you're working with someone else, everything has to be at the finished point before you hand it off. And that again depends on the medium. Your cover is so important. Your cover's got to speak to people when they look at it. They got to get a strong sense of what's in the pages, and then your pacing, which is where your editor comes in, and your word choices in. Uh, One of the biggest challenges prose writers have and comic writers is for some reason we love exposition. And the reason we love exposition is because we love the story world.
hmm
So we want you to know here's when they take out the trash, and here's how they make this food, and here's how the neutron particles combine with the X element, and that's what made the fusion. And we love that. And audiences like, just get to the story. Audiences always have the exact opposite reaction. They're like, just get to the story. And so when you're a writer, you're gonna have to become aware of that. You're gonna have to understand that all them pages you want to spend, that ain't what they want. That ain't what they want. They want to see the hero in a situation. They don't mind a window into their internal thought process, but it can't be 5 pages long, and so that's what I mean when I say there's not a balance. You need some other eyes there to tell you that that's too much exposition. Oh, okay, got to cut that down. When you love words like I do, your letterer has to tell you in your comic book, all them words ain't gonna fit in the panel. So you're gonna have to say less or say it different because we can't look at the pictures and look at the characters and they saying all that. And you can see that when you read comic books. You can see that those that tend to be more wordy, they love word balloons all over the page, and sometimes that can be kind of unwieldy. But that's what I mean when I say there's no balance. You just have to keep polishing and keep focusing on what you're doing. And when songs come, I have to write them down, and then I have to decide at some point when am I going to release them and how. And so that process is exactly the same with the book portion of my life. What kind of book is this? When am I going to drop it? And one thing I am doing, and good things happen to C2E2, besides meeting you,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
I'm, I'm really looking uh, for more partners in that area so I can focus more on the creative side because each part of the process is a specialty and it's better, like I said, with with like even the comic thing, it's better to have someone that specializes in the different nooks and crannies and kind of let them do their thing so you can do your thing. That's what I'm moving towards more in my life, because things become easier that way. Then I can have more of a schedule when I'm working with a partner. Says, okay, we need to drop it this time, so you
Yeah,
need to have it done this time. That makes it easier for me.
that's awesome, man. Incredible. Yeah, we had a great time at C2E2, David. We had dinner
It was
together.
great.
We had
Yeah.
a blast hanging out, man. That was a pretty amazing event. That was my first C2E2. I don't know about you if you go every year or
Oh, every year I'm a lifer. I love C2E2.
it's cool, man. I didn't
Yeah.
realize how good it was, and the kind of the artist alley was one of the better ones that I've seen. I mean, it was loaded. It was packed too. It was
Mhm.
packed every day in Artist Alley. So I had a blast meeting so many amazing creators. And then obviously you and I and Al, there's a bunch of us that kind of have our Comic Crusader side. We put those hats on and had a blast. And then obviously being able to honor so many amazing independent creators with the Heroic Awards, with Rick and everything, everybody on that side of the business is doing. But all together, man, it was a fantastic event. And then to, like you said, to get to meet you and then to understand the breadth of creativity that you've been doing all these years that I just wasn't aware of, David. I feel bad about it, man. Just all of a sudden I got exposed to David Taylor. I'm like, damn, man, this guy's been busy for a long time, which was a lot of fun. And that's kind of the fun of going to an event like a C2E2 and being open to meet other people. You realize, man, there's some amazing creatives out there, and it's a blast to be able to, take that friendship and add that to your repertoire of friends that you could kind of tap into and learn from, and you've done things that hopefully one day I'll be able to do it myself.
Well, thank you, and definitely, yeah, I'm here for you, dude. You know, one of the things that I always have to do with beginning authors is tell them you have to get the book in your hand.
Mhm.
If you don't push through, I heard a phrase. I'm trying to remember where I heard it from, but anyway, they said finished is better than perfect. That's the catchphrase every author needs to internalize, because you will get bogged down in analysis paralysis because you just keep going over and over and over. And I've worked with other creators like that, and we get something done and they just tear it all up, and we get something done and just tear it all up. And no, this isn't good enough. It needs to be different. It's not different enough. And I said, okay, well, what we have is good. Let's put out what we have, because what happens when you do that is you get crystallized feedback, and that can help you get to the thing you want. When you watch DVD commentaries, you can always hear the writers and the directors say, well, this wasn't everything I wanted. And they cut out this scene, and that's not how we meant that scene to go. And Joss Whedon has said, they said the lines, but they said them all wrong. And so we're never, when have you ever heard a creative say, yep, man, that was on point. Yep, that was there. Yep, that was, James Cameron, when he did the director's cut of Aliens, which is my favorite movie, by the way, he said, this is the movie we actually meant for you to see. And this expands on the story world more. So there's a theatrical cut, director's cut. And as fans, we loved that. We love comparing the two cuts. We love hearing what the director was thinking. So my point is that you gotta finish is better than perfect. You put it out, and you're going to get some crystallized feedback, and everything's not going to be what you want. Everything might not ever be what you want. So get it in your hand. And the other thing is what you just said. You said creatives out there doing stuff. None of that happens unless you have the content. If you don't actually have the books, if you don't actually have the songs, if you don't actually have something we can point to and say, this is my thing or whatever, then you're just a person with ideas. That's not bad, but that's going to get you a different result. When you talk to people that are always planning, never realizing, those things in years can fly by. And so that's one of the things I love to help other authors with, because I just couldn't finish. And I said, that's okay. What you mean is it wasn't perfect. What you mean it wasn't absolutely everything you wanted, that's okay. use what you have. There's so many different ways. If you say, I got down to my book and I got down to the last chapter and I couldn't write it, I said, great. We're going to split the book in two. We're going to put out the first half. You got that finished. And we're going to end on a cliffhanger. I guarantee you, after everybody keeps telling you, when the book coming out, I bet you finish it then. So, so I mean, so all that's part one. Part two is, and I say this all the time, Lord have mercy. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko probably didn't see what we have when they started. Bob Kane and Bill Finger. We know Siegel and Shuster didn't see it because they sold the rights to Superman for $130. So we know if they had seen today, because we know that there's been arguments with the estate, and so we know the history because we're looking back. But I always think about when you're looking at, and I'm like, do you think they thought, how long did Stan Lee have to wait for Marvel, the MCU, to become what we know it to be now? He created those characters in the 60s, and then there were movie attempts. And there were many movie attempts, and nothing hit like Iron Man hit in 2008. So we'd had movies before that, but they'd kind of been one-offs. So, Blade did pretty well, at least for the first two films. But what I'm saying is, Todd McFarlane and Spawn and his whole toy line and on and on and on. What I'm saying is, when you're creating, Nike, just do it. Just get it done. Just get something in your hand. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be everything you wanted. You're going to see a million ways to improve it. It's going to spark a million shoot off ideas. Oh, that's okay. But if you don't get something done and just get it in your hand and just, you can't go to C2E2 and say, here's some free comic book samples because don't have that. You can't say, here's my website with my other stuff because don't have that. And so you don't want to be one of those people forever stuck in the idea phase. Get it in your hand, and one day you may be able to option it off for a multi-million-dollar contract for a Netflix series or a movie or whatever. That is just awesome. I mean, so many books have become movies, and when they're and the movie audience is a whole brand new segment from the book audience. But none of that happens if you don't have a book. Zero. And so that's always my thing. We as creative people, because we're always so many steps ahead, or because we're dreamers, or because we see so much potential, if you look at that too long, it will paralyze you. And that's, to me, it's almost analogous to saying, you remember Octomom? Octomom had 6 kids and then took fertility drugs and had 8 at once.
Yeah.
That's analogous to you saying, well, if I can't have 8 babies at once, then forget it. I just don't want to have a baby at all. Well, most of us are born one at a time. That's okay. Not everybody's a twin or a triplet or a quad or whatever. That's okay. It's okay. You can still have 8 kids if you have one at a time. That's okay. You don't have to have 8 babies. So, at once.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. Get it done. Won't be perfect. Get some feedback. Keep moving. And then when you meet other people, you at least have a body of work. And that is one of the hardest mental hurdles to get over. But you got to get over it. There's a whole lot of getting over yourself you have to do when you're creative. There's a whole lot of you got to get over yourself. There's a whole lot of people can't read your mind. People can't hear it, see it like you do, and they never will. That's why we have directors. Play directors, movie directors. That's why you have a director. No, say it this way. No, here's the blocking. No, here's the emotion in the scene. No, here, you got to tell the actors, and then they create the moment. And then sometimes they create things that are so far beyond. And another thing while I'm on this is you can create stuff that takes on a life of its own. And that's what Star Wars is to me. I think that George Lucas told a lot of the story he wanted to tell, and then I think he didn't have the technology in the original trilogy to tell the story he wanted to tell. And then I think the phenomenon of Star Wars happened, and it became this whole other thing. When I hear him talk about Darth Vader the way he sees him, and when I think about the way I see him and the way fans see him, it's different. It's different because Lucas sees the existence of Darth Vader as the failure of Anakin. And we see Darth Vader as the best screen villain in history. So, so you can take on something, and that's another thing you have to get over yourself as a creator. Your fans aren't going to see it like you see it. And the bigger the thing becomes, the more true that becomes. And that's what I think sometimes leads to the missteps or the perceived missteps. Because fans will say, why did they do this? You'll see something happen in a show or movie or book, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
And because they don't see it like you see it. And so that's another thing when you're a creator, you got to get over yourself. You got to understand if you put a couple together and you always meant to kill one of them off, by the time you get through selling that love to your fans, they're going to love it.
Yeah.
So maybe you wanted an emotional punch, but you didn't expect all that backlash. So,
And there's benefits in that too, though, right? That could help bring forth, I guess, aspects of a story that maybe you haven't thought of, or that inspiration had it come, right? If you're open to the fans giving their critiques.
I think so.
Mm,
But once again, it goes back to the medium
mm,
because you can't, Lucas it did a lot of tweaking. You
yeah.
can't change the movie. Maybe you can do a director's cut. But one of my favorite examples, besides the whole Star Wars extended universe, because I met Timothy Zahn at a con one time, and I just fanboyed out. I was like, Timothy freaking Zahn, It was so awesome meeting him because I just, love everything he did. He almost single-handedly kept Star Wars alive after the OT. But one of my favorite examples besides that is Aliens. The things that they did with the elements in the movies that they did in the Dark Horse series and some of the other series. Like, for example, everything we know about the company, about Weyland Yutani in the movies, was that they wanted the alien species. But in some of the novels, the Steve Perry novels, and some of the Dark Horse books, we find out that the alien jelly has multiple applications, medicinal properties. You can grow things in it. It has so many different things, aromatic properties, just so many things you can do with this foreign substance that they knew about, that they saw billions of dollars in, and it puts a different spin. I was like, oh wow, not justifying, I understand what the company was, but I'm saying it expands, So to answer your question is yes. When you open it up to different stuff like that, it can take the story in whole new directions that maybe the first medium didn't have time to get into, or maybe the original creators didn't think of at all. And then when that happens, it's going to take on a life of its own.
Yeah.
Lucas saw Vader as Anakin's failure, and he saw Vader as trying to recruit Luke because he wanted to overthrow the Emperor, because he was never the man he should have been, because he was dismembered. When you read the Charles Soule Darth Vader books, you see why Vader was the most feared figure in the galaxy. When Vader showed up, people got really nervous and got really quiet. It's just different. He's not a failure in the eyes of most people. So the answer to your question is yes. It's just that you have to be prepared for that. And part of that is a principle of letting go. It's no different with your natural children. One of the things you must accept as a parent is that children are not designed to stay children. You have a very life means for you to be grown. You spend less than 10% of your life as a child, and it never comes back. So parenting is the art of holding on and letting go. When you first come out your mother's womb, I have to hold on to you completely because you can't even hold your own head up. Can't control your bowels, can't control your limbs, and you can't talk. So I have to be there all the time. As you grow, eventually I have to let you go and let you go build your own house. And so creative endeavors are literally exactly like that. That as they grow, some of that you might have to let go. If you don't want to let go and don't franchise, just keep it all to yourself. Because if you franchise, guess what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Some of you're gonna have to let go of some of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not easy.
Not easy, yeah. Not easy. I can only imagine. I mean, I am a father, and it's not easy seeing your kids grow old, but like you said, you got to let them figure things out. You got to let them their spread their wings. There's so many different things that you have to do, and like you said, them being dependent on you for so long, that's not the easiest thing to do as a parent, but it's also a disservice not to do that, right?
Well, yes, I was a single dad, and so it was just me and my son for so long, and so you have to change your thinking
Mm,
because you can't just jump up and do anything.
right.
You can't do that, if you're in a nuclear family situation, but definitely not if you're a single parent. But then as time goes on and you're watching him, go on all different kind of stuff and strike out on his own, and then you have to watch from a distance, but you got to let him experience stuff. So no, it's not. It's nothing easy about it. And then, until your kids become parents themselves, they want to understand that you can put 20 years, sometimes 25 years if you get them through a 4-year degree or a marriage or whatever. You're
Yeah.
going to put a quarter century of your life into just making sure they were okay. I don't think that's an experience that can be fully related to until you have it yourself,
Hmm.
you know? And so on the creative side, I think it's very, very similar. That's why I have such respect for the founding fathers of comic books, if you will. I know because I've studied extensively and continue to study Black creators, Black comics. First superheroes, Lothar with Mandrake the Magician, excuse me, in the 30s, and all Negro comics, and first Mexican comics. The green, I forgot his name. I think it's the Green Turtle. That's it. Asian heroes, and I've studied stuff like that. And continue to study because I love stuff like that. First Black Superman was actually Black Butterfly. Wasn't Storm. Wasn't Misty Knight. Wasn't any of that. So I get that art is problematic because it's always going to be a reflection of the time it was created in. And there's no country that just has a untroubled history, I guess you might say. So I get that. I get wanting to see different types of characters. I get it. When Empire Strikes Back came out, we all said, first Black man in this universe, and he's a traitor. So I mean, I get it. I get it. I get the vitriol. I get the different perspective. I get it. I really do. Last time I was at a convention, I was on a panel, and some of the women were talking about how there were women warriors in history, and they were tired of not seeing women on the battlefield. So they did research and they studied the bones of fallen warriors, and it said some of those pelvises were female.
Mm.
So this all male battlefield isn't always accurate. And I get why they were saying, I get it. But I don't look upon them creating in the time they created with any kind of venom because what else were they supposed to do? When people look back on this time, art is just a reflection of the time it's created. And there's literally no way around that. Even if you're ahead of your time, if you create something before the world is ready for it, it will be out of sync. Like several people tried reality TV before it hit, and Sean Cassidy was one of them.
Mm.
And they tried things that just didn't hit at the time, and then when the time was right, then they hit, and everybody's like, "Oh, this is great." I'm like, "Well, we've seen this before, just one time." So I'm saying all that to say that that's part of the process. That's part of the creator's life that you have to understand that culture is going to impact. And if you want to go counterculture, the fact that it's counterculture is because there's a culture there to counter.
Mm-hmm.
And when people look back on your work, they're going to see it differently than the time you created it in, you know. And I get that as an African American, I get it. I get it from so many different angles, but you can't do nothing about the past,
Yeah.
and you can't judge the past in light of today's values. But I have lived long enough to that doesn't really have a lot of meaning for me because I've lived long enough to see the people change their mind every 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So just the clothes that we wore 10 years ago, if you wore them now.
Yeah.
So there's this great scene in The Wiz, which is supposed to be the black version of The Wizard of Oz, which the play is one thing, the movie's another. I get it. I'm not disparaging it.
Yeah.
But there's this great scene in the middle that I love that it's so deep and on point. In The Wiz, what happens is the wizard comes on a loudspeaker and the wizard changes the color of the Emerald City. And every time he changes the color, it triggers a new musical number. And then they say, that old color is out.
Mm.
So when we first go to the Emerald City, everybody's dancing around, everybody's green. And then the next is the wizard comes on and said, green is dead. From now on, the color is red. And everything changes to red. And everybody starts dancing. And they say, I wouldn't want to be seen green. That is how I go. That's why I like that scene so. So whatever is just we would have never believed that you would pay money for ripped jeans. When your mama bought you jeans and you came home with a hole in them, that was hell to pay. Like, oh no, you done ripped your new pants. Now people pay hundreds of dollars. So I know whatever is in vogue, whatever's in fashion right now, oh, you're not cool, or you're not a step with the times, you're blah, 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 blah. 5 years from now, they're going to introduce something to you that was out when I was a kid, but it's new to you. So now all of a sudden, so stuff like that doesn't bother me. I get it, but it doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
Because just wait a few years and it'll flip again.
It's true. It's true. All the stuff coming out now that we grew up with that a new generation is enjoying for the first time. And you're like, man, we had that. We had that, right? But it is different now. It's completely
Right.
different, but
Different,
it's the
different.
same at the same time, you know?
Well, they see it differently
Yeah.
than we saw it
Yeah.
because the 90s was the explosion of more teen-centered dramas and content as a focus. It's not that we didn't have them before the 90s, but the 90s, we got the WB.
Yeah.
So, we got Dawson's Creek, we got Buffy, we got Gilmore Girls, we got Roswell, we got a whole bunch of teen center shows, and then that fed into Smallville.
Mm.
And so it kind of established the genre, kind of established into, what happens in the hero's life when they're that age, or what happens in your life when you're in that age and all that. But it's not that the content didn't exist, is that it became a focus in the 90s, where we had entire channels and book series dedicated to coming of age stories. And so now that's so much a part of the fabric until if you're young now,
Yeah.
it looks different to you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm saying. It just wait a few years, it'll be something else. And then you'll be old, you'll be first you were 25, then you're 28, and 28 is old. 30 is old. I'm 30 now. Lord have mercy. Whatever.
Wait until you're 50, man.
There are pros and cons. There's strengths
Yeah,
and weaknesses to literally to every stage of life.
exactly. Yeah.
When you're running around super young, you got all that energy, but you got no focus.
Yeah.
You got all that energy, but you got no patience. And focus and patience you pay for with years. There's no way around it. So that's just the way life is. So
Yeah. Amazing, David. Amazing, man. Loved our conversation, my friend.
Well,
Love
thank
it.
you for having me. This was great. A lot of fun.
Oh, we got to do this again, my friend. We will definitely.
Absolutely. Well, when I launch this next book, I definitely want to come back.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely love to have you back on, talk about that. But in the meantime, David, I mean, let's talk about how fans can follow you as far as like social media. Where are you at and how can fans follow you on social media?
Best place to get me is Twitter. I'm on Twitter every day. My Twitter handle is DT2 Comics Chat.
Yeah.
DT2 Comics Chat. I'm on Twitter every day. Um, I'm on Instagram too at DT2 Author. I just don't post as much on Insta, but I'm on there. And but that's the best place to get me to find all my book stuff in one spot. My
Mhm.
website is davidtaylor2.net. So best places to
We'll
reach
make
me.
sure you put your link tree down below as well, because I know a lot of your handles are found there as well to make it easy for everybody. But yeah, and then as far as kind of the next thing, I know we talked a little bit about some of the things that you're working on. You got a lot. What do you think is that next item that will be the one that you'll be launching here in the next few months?
The next thing is a comic that I'm launching.
Nice. Yeah.
And anything I say will be a spoiler,
No,
but
no, no, no. We don't
I,
want to do that here.
I'm going to be willing to talk about it when I launch it. But I mean, it's really going to be big, really going to be huge. I've got a lot of surprises in it. And then I have quite a few of my followers that have been waiting for this series in particular. And so when I'm ready to do that, it's going to be calling all cars, baby. So so can't wait. So that'll be this year. That's my plan.
I love it. And then as far as the musician side of David, where can people find some of your work musically?
Um, you can find me at the Intrepid Songwriter.
Mm,
That's my handle. I'm the Intrepid Songwriter everywhere: YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and I'm always links to my music are always there, and I'm also always dropping music business tips
mm.
and stuff that I wish I had known when I started. So I want to help other artists out. So the Intrepid Songwriter is where to find me on my music side.
I love it. I love it. Are we missing anything, David?
Not for now, but
Not for now.
talk to me in September. I mean, I have a whole slew of new stuff.
Well, that's a deal, my friend. We got to come back as we get closer to some of your newer stuff that is about to drop this year. But in the meantime, I'll make sure I put all the links below. That way you could get anything and everything that David has worked on over the last I don't know how many years, but there's a lot of content out there, a lot of amazing work that you have been able to accomplish, David. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate meeting you at C2E2, and then obviously coming on the podcast, man. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and definitely won't be our last time, my friend.
Well, that feeling is quite mutual. I was so glad to meet you and so enjoyed our conversation and so enjoyed this conversation. And so, yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Can't wait to be on again because we got some geek stuff to talk about.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. I love it, David. Well, I wish you the very best weekend coming up. I know we'll chat outside of this, but in the meantime, I'll put all the links down. I just want to say thank you for joining me today. Really appreciate the conversation. It was deep, it was in depth. I think it's going to help a lot of other creators, and just thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, my friend. Have a great weekend.
You too.
All right, talk soon.
Bye bye.